We've tested clickbait stuff where someone's getting hit by a train or a car at the beginning of the video and it changes into our sticks. And that video has probably seen 2 million views just on that video early on. We've tried everything.
You're listening to Customer Growth Sessions, presented by Intergrowth, where we talk through strategies to help up-and-coming e-commerce businesses bring in more customers. I'm your host, Pat Ahern. Let's jump in. All right, listeners, welcome back to the latest episode of Customer Growth Sessions. Today, I'm thrilled to have on Zechariah Thomas, the founder and CEO over at Swift Hockey. Zechariah, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. You have one hell of a story. I'm excited to jump in. Can we start out by talking about Swift Hockey? First of all, what is Swift Hockey? Give us an overview of the company.
Yeah, quick overview of Swift Hockey. I personally started playing hockey at the age of 10 years old. I always felt the passion for it. In the areas I grew up, it was always really expensive to buy equipment and gear. It was a really bad situation for a lot of the players and the families to buy equipment. So I always did whatever I could on my own end to give some of my equipment away, give my employee discounts when I used to work at a regular sports store back in the day to help other people. And that's how, when I had the opportunity, I started Swift Hockey like that.
Now, before you started Swift Hockey, obviously you had a bit of a stint as a professional hockey player. Can you tell us a little about that story before we jump into Swift Hockey?
Yeah, for sure. I guess throughout my hockey playing career, I ended up being pretty decent, I would say. I played at some of the highest levels, junior A. I played a little bit of major junior during COVID, in and out of, I guess, the bubble is what it was called. And then I ended up playing a little bit of minor pro before fully retiring and just doing business at that point.
So when we were talking before the show, one of the things you had mentioned, Swift Hockey is located in 40 different stores right now. Retail is generating a lot of sales, but early stages of the business, I want to talk about like how you really got your start, like where those early sales came from before you started getting into so many retailers.
Yeah, like even now, I would say we don't do a very high amount of number in retail compared to what we do direct to consumer. What we have done on the retail side, I guess on the direct to consumer side in the early days and even now has been really different compared to most companies, I would say, is where we have focused very heavily on content. And that's why I feel like majority or almost all of the hockey industry at this point that's young enough to be on social media has seen us, because we have dominated any other brand on the content side, even comparing to the Bowers and the CCMs. We completely destroyed them on the content side of things.
Man, I love that. And today, that's the big theme I want to get into, because my takeaway from our initial chat was you've really built the business up on posting to organic social. And that is a really time intensive and really challenging thing to get right, and a really challenging way to scale the business. And you've mastered it. So I want to start out with talking about really early stages of launching Swift Hockey. You had mentioned Instagram is really one of the big channels you work on today. How did you get started with building the following on Instagram? What were some of the key highlights that really stood out to you in the early stages?
Yeah, so I guess in the early stages, I've done everything possible to make Swift be known everywhere with no money. That was ultimately the ultimate goal. We never had a marketing budget like the big brands. It's hard to compete with some of those big brands when you're starting out. So we never had the marketing budget, but we were extremely consistent and creative in what we did. We were okay with being the bad guys and causing havoc on the internet in our early days, for sure. So even now, we still have to do the same thing because we still don't have the marketing budget to be seen everywhere and doing paid ads everywhere. But we do as best as we can right now to be seen everywhere at price of content, which is free by posting. So
I love that you brought up the idea of really all that. I want to start out diving into consistency first of all, and then we'll get into creativity in a minute. Define consistency for me. Are you of the belief that you should be posting like a certain amount of times per week, per day? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I believe consistency is everything. I try and keep, honestly, my whole life consistent. And I think that's been seen maybe even throughout our content overall, where we have done everything to be posting as much as humanly possible. Now we've slowed down a little bit more on the quality side, but we're still more active than any other social media in our industry. In our early days when we were first starting, we didn't have content. It was really hard to build content. So we posted everything. Like we would see a kid wearing a Swift Hockey t-shirt back in the day and we would post it. We see anybody, children playing, using a Swift Hockey or playing a Swift Hockey stick, and we'd post everything. That kind of helped us get our footing in the market because we literally posted everything. I think us just being pretty active and just posting every day, multiple times a day, and being active on our stories probably got us to around 10,000 followers initially. Then after 10,000 followers, we really moved to video content, which we weren't doing before.
So let's say early stages, when you talk about consistency, were you waking up, let's say on like a Monday morning saying to yourself, like, okay, I need to find 3 things to post today? Was it more so like an organic type of thing where, as you said, you'd see some kids playing hockey on the pond, you'd grab a photo and then post it to Instagram from there?
Yeah, I think it's been a mix of both. Like some days we didn't have any content, we would have to force something. But whenever we had something, like some days we'd post 10 times a day. Some days we would post at least maybe 2 or 3 back in the day, but we would almost do whatever it took to do more. The whole goal was doing more because we needed that output at a young stage to become more successful. And we have to market in any company, you have to market, and we have to do that the most without a budget.
Oh, of course, of course. I'm also curious with the content creation side of things. Do you tend to batch create content? Hypothetically, you'll sit down every Thursday of the month and say, okay, I need to put together posts for the entire upcoming week. Or is it more so a little bit of time that you allocate every day to it?
Yeah, now like we have a team, we're a lot more structured. We typically will film 2 times a week for around 8 to 6 hours total between both the days. And then after that, they're editing the rest of the time, but we'll do 8 hours of filming, typically Tuesdays, Monday, Wednesdays we'll film, and then the rest of the time they'll be editing. And that's almost it for every week. We try and keep on a certain cadence there.
Amazon is the ultimate double-edged sword when it comes to generating sales. It's an incredible source of revenue for e-com brands, but become too successful and you risk Amazon creating the Amazon Basics version of your product and taking away all your sales. We see it happen all the time, and that's why we help businesses to build a second customer acquisition machine before they lose their Amazon sales. Interested in hearing more? Reach out to us at intergrowth.com/CGS to book a complimentary strategy session with our team. Once again, that's intergrowth.com/CGS. All right, back to the show. So that's a perfect segue over to the creativity element. When you first started creating video, I would imagine you tried out a lot of different video formats. I'm curious, in the early stages of the company, what were some of the maybe key traits that stood out for the video formats that really resonated with your audience?
Yeah, I would say we've tested everything. And I think we've been lucky to be smaller at that stage because bigger companies they wouldn't be able to test what we have tested. We have tested clickbait stuff where someone's getting hit by a train or a car at the beginning of the video and it changes in 5 or 6. And that video has probably seen 2 million views just on that video early on. We've tried everything, but I feel like what resonated, we have a really great story overall with why I started Swift Hockey and why we're going to continue to be battling the biggest people in the industry day in, day out. And that has resonated with everybody. And those have been our biggest sellers and biggest videos overall, where we're talking about our story and kind of going into maybe clipping up a little bit of a Dragons Den episode or any other organic content we've been on. We've clipped it up in that sense.
Now, how did you go about, I would imagine with the film crew, it's probably a little bit more sophisticated nowadays, but let's talk early stages of the business. Budgets are tight. What tools were you using to create that video content? Was it as straightforward as like picking up your phone and just recording videos vertically? How did you approach that?
Yeah, we had to contract when it was affordable. Like we contracted video guys. Still pretty expensive to do it that way. Actually, more expensive to be honest, which doesn't make any sense. But it's more expensive for us to contract people. So we used to contract video guys, maybe one shoot every month. They would give us honestly maybe 3 videos for that whole time. But we would be able to do a lot of spins on the videos, on the creatives we were actually putting in. They would do our 3 videos, and but we would take all of the B-roll as well, or all of the non-editable things, and we would use Fiverr or outsource and things like that to edit the rest of the videos.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So let's say for listeners who are sitting there, they're running an e-com brand, they're trying to really build up their following on Instagram. From your experience, maybe getting to those first 10,000 followers, or maybe even going beyond that stage, what guidance would you give them to really scale up their, I wouldn't even say their follower base, but to scale up like their fan base and start getting some revenue coming from Instagram?
Yeah, I think revenue is a weird thing when it's mixed with content, in my opinion. It's really like even a week ago, we had a video that touched 12 million views within the first 3 days. It didn't generate anything. Some of our videos were their brand stories, and we're telling a lot more of our stories. And they may hit 100,000 views. That video may generate $100,000. So it's really weird to know what's going to hit until you're testing a whole lot and trying everything. I think with what a lot of companies try and do is they try and stay in one bottle or in one area of things where they're not exploring, they're not testing anything. And if you look at some of these smaller companies' feeds, they'll keep it all color coordinated. They'll do all these little things that they think is going to give more information and help their customer. But we tested everything. And that's why we've found what works, found what doesn't work. And sometimes it is just about bringing views in and traffic to help that long-term branding. But obviously generating revenue is the only thing that's important in business to keep the business running ultimately. So
Absolutely. No, and I like the way you put it about how sometimes you might get some of those videos that get 100K views that are going to generate, as you said, 100K in revenue. Other times you might get a video that gets 12 million views. It doesn't generate any video or any video revenue, but maybe it's a huge brand builder. Maybe you get some people back to your site a month from now and they end up making a purchase. I'm curious, with assessing performance of content, do you tend to almost like batch content into a couple buckets and say, okay, with this type of content, here's the specific goal we're really looking for it to achieve. With this type of content, here's the goal we're looking for it to achieve. So you can kind of assess what works and what doesn't work, or how do you approach that?
Yeah, we try and stay pretty active overall. Our goal is we try and make 4 to 5 types of content, I would say, where some of them are giving value, peer value to the customers, and others are really just fillers and challenges and things like that. But we really try and give as much as humanly possible to the customer. It's the value side of things. I feel like if we're not giving value, customers aren't going to consistently follow us. They're not going to like the brand. So we try and give as much value as possible, but giving value pretty frequently isn't too easy. So we spread it out and we mix in some other things to stay consistent on our marketing overall and doing more of what's free on the marketing side.
That's perfect. One of the things I wanted to ask you about today is that I would almost call it like that equation between the content that's going to focus on giving value versus maybe that content that's a little bit more sales focused in nature. Do you have like a general ratio in your mind of, for every X posts that give value, we're going to have one sales centric post? How do you think about that and make sure that you're not being overly salesy, let's say, in your social content?
Yeah, like even with our we don't really push any sort of sales within any of our socials, to be honest. Like the only thing we do, we'll push the brand story a lot, and we never really. I'd say 90% of our content, we're not pushing people to say, we don't really have a call to action. A lot of it, it's kind of explaining the story, and people fall in love with the content, and they'll end up purchasing after they know what we're actually selling. But most people do, they fell in love with the brand story, and that's kind of how it started. And obviously we try our best to make the best product in the world as well. So,
well, Zachariah, tell me about the team that you're working with that helps you to create all this content for Swift Hockey on a regular basis.
no, exactly. I think I have one of the greatest teams in the world. I talk very highly about especially the content team and the marketing team we have here as well. But it takes a lot to build out what we currently have. And that's why it's very hard to compete with us in the sports industry, even the content side of things, because currently we have three videographers, but they all do a mix of editing and filming and then content creation as well. So they do a mix of all of the things we need to build content, and we have somebody actually doing planning, the organization, and actual posting of it as well. So we have 4 people directly doing everything marketing oriented, everything content creative. So it takes a lot to build what we have done, but if it ends up being worth it for us with where we're at currently. So
people ask me all the time, should I be using ChatGPT to create content for my site? So here's the thing. AI is great at quickly spitting out blog content. It's also great at pissing off your following. If you've spent years building your brand and follower base, why would you risk that all with AI-generated content? At Intergrowth, we work with companies that see their brand as an asset to get more customers through human-crafted articles that your customers look for online. We master your brand voice and work with your team to write the best articles on the internet that bring you customers on autopilot from search engines like Google. Interested in hearing more? Reach out to us at intergrowth.com/CGS to book a complimentary strategy session with our team. I'm curious, at what stage in the business did you find it made sense to bring on the first full-time social media hire?
yeah, I think that was ultimately the first hire I truly made, is bringing on somebody who really knows marketing. We're always looking every day for great marketing people, because those are people that could really change the company forever. Overall, we have first marketing piece was in our early days when we couldn't afford it, in my opinion, because I was always looking for people who can fit best with us and understand our brand alignment, and then also understand how much we're trying to be posting, what we're trying to do through our socials overall.
Absolutely. Well, I think last big theme I wanted to get into today is obviously you had a guest appearance on Dragon's Den, so I want to hear how that came about. Walk me through that. How did you end up getting in front of Dragon's Den? And for any US based listeners, that's the Canadian equivalent of Shark Tank. So how did you end up pitching to what I would imagine you guys refer to as the Dragons?
Yeah, it was definitely a really cool experience. It was really weird how I even ended up there, to be honest, because I got an email that was in my spam inbox from one of the young entrepreneur companies that help people grow, like Business Bank of Canada, I believe. So they sent us an email saying, apply for Dragons Den. So I applied as almost a joke, because during those times I was really shy, I would say, and I never spoke in public. My parents didn't think it was gonna work out well, because I've never spoken in public ever. But so I ended up doing the online application. They ended up telling me to come down and do the in-person. I did really well in the in-person, I would say. I think it's really, overall, on a speaking side of things, I think it's really easy to speak about something that you're passionate about. And I don't have to fake it at all. And I know exactly what I'm talking about. So it's been really easy on what we're trying to do and how I've been able to explain it. After that, we pretty much right on air. Around 3 months later, we were right on air after the application was done, after the in-person was done, we were on air. That was a pretty crazy experience overall, because the set is exactly what you guys see on TV. It looks the exact same. You don't see any cameras. You don't see anything. And I think they said they do that because they don't want people to be nerve wracked by seeing 500 cameras, because that's really what it is through all the holes they hide in there. But they don't want people being nervous, but there's over 500 cameras. sitting there filming at the same time. But walking up to the den, it's the same thing you would envision on TV. But we ended up getting 3 offers on May. We ended up accepting one, and that was kind of the whole process from there.
That's amazing. Within that, one of my assumptions that comes with that is that the financial backing that you get as part of that is probably beneficial, but that there is far more, like, call it less tangible benefits that come out of partnering with one of the dragons. So talk to us about that. What are some of the big benefits you get out of that?
Even with us, we didn't hear from anybody for around a year. After the episode, we didn't hear from anybody for around a year. So we actually turned down the deal when we heard back from them. It seems, from my understanding, to be very, very, very common, where I think it's around 80% of deals don't end up closing after the TV, but you get a lot of publicity. Dragon's Den's not as big as Shark Tank US, but you get a lot. You're known everywhere, and people can trust you a lot more, is what I noticed overall. But yeah, we didn't end up closing a deal after that, but we've been growing because we didn't hear from anybody for a year, and our whole valuation at that time changed because the episode had aired. We've been seen everywhere at that time, and didn't make sense during those times. So
going into this, I always had this assumption that almost like once you got the verbal from them on air, that it would be within 24 hours that they'd have an agreement over to you and you'd sign the dotted line. You're the second ecom founder that I've spoken to in maybe the past like month or so, though, who had a similar experience to that. Another person I was talking to got an offer to partner with someone, ended up turning it down a couple months later after getting just a little bit more information about the terms and conditions. That's fascinating, though.
Yeah, it's not in the founders' favor at all. They're making investments, so I can understand on all sides, but it's never in the founders' favor to accept those deals or kind of go through that with overall, and it doesn't make sense a lot of other times from what I've seen or what I've heard as well from others.
Absolutely. Well, Zechariah, this has been amazing. For listeners that, let's say, want to either follow Swift Hockey on social or want to buy your products, where can they find you guys online?
Yeah, we're at swifthockey.com. You can find us, Swift Hockey, anywhere, all platforms, everything. We're pretty decent social following and post a lot of content as well, so you can see what we're doing day to day and how our ice shoots and everything look. And behind the scenes, we post a lot on our stories as well. So,
well, once again, listeners, this is Zechariah Thomas, the founder and CEO over at Swift Hockey. Zechariah, thank you for coming on the show today.
Yeah, no problem. Nice being here.
Thanks for tuning in to Customer Growth Sessions. If you found it helpful, subscribe and give us a review. It helps us to grow the show. Looking for more SEO guidance on how to grow your business? Contact us at intergrowth.com/estimator or email me directly. You can reach me at pat@intergrowth.com. That's all for today. We'll see you again soon.